Hey, what's up you guys, it's Connor, and today I'm going to be continuing my 2018 reading wrap-up where I talk about all of the most recent books that I've read. This video is going to contain numbers 106 through 116. If you missed any of the other parts, I will leave them all in the description as a playlist and you can check them out. But let's go ahead and get started. The 106th thing that I read in 2018 is a short story called Traps. I do not even know how to pronounce the author's name, but this one follows this guy named Trap, or Traps. I can't remember his name. He's not a great guy. At the beginning of the book, his car breaks down and he decides he's not even gonna tell his wife because she won't believe him anyway. That kind of like hints that he's not a great person and probably cheats on his wife, stuff like that. Anyway, he runs into someone who offers him to stay at their house, so he goes along with this guy and he finds out that the guy is an old judge. The judge has friends that are also retired from the legal profession. They all come together at dinner to have a bit of a game with the main character, and during the course of that game, it's basically talking about how you can get found guilty for something that you weren't even the cause of or anything like that, and how people can manipulate situations and manipulate laws and everything like that to make someone guilty or to make someone not guilty of something. I really enjoyed it. I think that it does a really good job of showing how malleable laws can potentially be if the people that are manipulating them are terrible people. At the beginning of the story, he gets assigned his defense attorney, and the defense attorney is trying to coach him and trying to get him not to say things or get him not to speak too much because he'll likely fall into a trap. I think one of the lines in the book is something like, "We'll find a crime for you to have committed," and that's like kind of what happens during the course of this short story. I really enjoyed it. It's a really quick read. I definitely recommend it if you're wanting to read something like that. Yeah, enjoyed that one. I ended up giving that short story 4 stars. After that, I picked up In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. This is the first true crime novel. I had to read this, and I read Traps for my law and literature class. I actually did a full review of In Cold Blood, and I'll leave that up in the card symbol if you want to check it out, because I did a lot of research and I included pictures in that review, so if you're wanting to know more about it, definitely check it out. This one follows Perry Smith and Dick Hickok, who murdered a family, and then this book follows the family before they're murdered. It follows townspeople from the town after the murder happens, and their world is kind of shaken up. And it also follows Perry and Dick as they're bopping around the country and trying to avoid getting in trouble. I ended up really enjoying this. I gave it 4 stars, but I definitely can see why people would not really enjoy this as much. One thing is that this actually happened in real life. Not all of the details are as accurate as they potentially could have been. We don't know for sure, but the murder did happen, and there are pictures if you want to look it up. I didn't include pictures of the bodies, but there are pictures of the bodies on the internet if you want to look it up and find it. So knowing that this actually did happen and that these people did exist is kind of weird to read about, because I'm used to reading a lot of fiction. So some of the people in my class found this book particularly hard to read because of the fact that the people were real people and they were murdered by Dick and Perry. There's also an immense amount of detail in this book, and so much detail that maybe potentially could have been cut out without losing anything. All of this detail, for me, gave me a clear picture of all of the characters. I really felt like I knew the 2 murderers in this book. So I thought that the detail was needed and I enjoyed it, but a lot of people get really bogged down in all of those details and find the book extremely slow. I listened to the audiobook, which helped a lot because you can speed up audiobooks. That's the method that I did, but yeah, definitely enjoyed this one. Gave it 4 stars. As I said, check out my review if you want to know more. I forgot to say that this is also part of a reading project that I decided to take on. I'm going to read through a bunch of Truman Capote's works and do individual reviews on them. So if you want to talk about In Cold Blood, you can do that on the review of In Cold Blood that I post on the channel, but if you want to talk about any of the other books, just wait for those reviews to pop up. The next Truman Capote review that I do will be on Other Voices, Other Rooms. The 108th thing that I read in 2018 is Animal Farm by George Orwell. George Orwell is the father of the modern day dystopian novel, and I had read 1984 in high school, didn't really enjoy it, but I decided to give Animal Farm a shot because I think it was referenced in a couple of other law and literature essays that I've had to read for this class, so I figured I might as well pick it up and read what it's about. I honestly feel like this book is very timely because of everything that's happening in the United States. But basically, this is about a farm where the farm animals decide to take over the farm and rule themselves. The pigs of this farm organize everything and get everything together, and when they rise up and take over the farm, the pigs are kind of in charge, but everyone is being treated decently fair, and so everyone's really happy that they're now free. But during the course of the novel, the pigs start changing things, and basically the people in power are corrupt and terrible, and I really ended up enjoying this one. I gave this one 4 stars as well. A lot of the books in this wrap-up I gave 4 stars because I was enjoying a lot of them. This is not one where I think that the characters are what bring you to the story. I think that it's all of the political maneuvering that's happening within this animal society, this animal farm, is what makes this book particularly interesting. I found this one to be an extremely quick and easy read. I was just thinking about the current state of the United States while reading this and thinking about how related they could be. Recommend it if you're looking to read about dystopians and that kind of thing. After that, I finally finished The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. I started this book before the school semester started because Elliot was doing a bit of a read-along with it, and we were all in different buddy groups and everything like that. I was on course for like 100 and something pages, and then my course load became super crazy and I couldn't keep up, and this had to be put off to the side. So I finally went back and finished it. This is an epic fantasy book that is set in this world where there has been a section of the world that's been cut off, where all of these terrible magical beings are in the north and they're kept away from people, and all the people are living safely in the south. There are the augurs, and then there are the gifted. The augurs were, before this book starts, in control of this land and this country, and then the gifted helped the augurs run things and everything like that, and then there's just regular humans that don't have access to magic. And before this book started, there was a bit of a revolution, and all of the augurs were killed off, and the gifted were basically enslaved. So now there's regular humans that are in charge of everything. The gifted are forced to serve humans, and if they decide not to serve humans, then they get killed or their magic gets taken away, and then there are no augurs anymore. At the beginning of this book, the augurs start to come back, and it just follows the main character as he is finding out that he has powers that are more in line with augurs than with the gifted, and then it follows a bunch of other characters as well. Obviously, you're not just following one character in this, and it's a lot more complicated than I just explained. I really enjoyed this. You can definitely tell that James pulled from a lot of different epic fantasy books that are popular. I think someone in the buddy group was saying how James took a lot of inspiration from Brandon Sanderson, and I can definitely see how that happened. Like, they have pretty similar writing styles. It's very easy to get into, very easy to read, and the magic system is pretty concrete and is being explained throughout the course of this novel, and I'm sure will be explained even more going forward in the series. One of Brandon Sanderson's things that he says is there's always another secret, and I think that James took that to heart, and there's always another secret. There's always something new to learn in this world, which makes it very interesting to read about. One of the characters actually has the name of my brother, which was so weird because my brother's name is pretty not common. My brother's name is Torin, T-O-R-I-N, so it was weird to see someone named my brother's name in a book. But yeah, I can't really say too much other than that. I think that the magic system was really well done. I've really enjoyed the world building. Like, the world building has a little bit of the Game of Thrones vibe, where there's the White Walkers and there's like all of the magic in the north that's feared and everything like that, and then all the people live below the wall. It's kind of a similar situation in here. So yeah, I really liked the world building. I really liked the magic system. I thought the writing was really solid and easy to get through. The characters were all pretty engaging, and I really liked reading about all of them because throughout the course of the novel you get a bigger and better picture of this world as a whole, as well as these different areas that the different characters are in. So yes, I did really enjoy this one. I definitely am going to be continuing when I get a hold of the second book at some point, but yeah, I gave this one 4 stars as well. I forgot to say that this is the first book in the Lycanis trilogy. The next book I ended up picking up was The Summoner's Handbook by Taran Matharu. This is a companion-ish story that goes along with the Summoner series, the Summoner trilogy. I included the first book in one of my wrap-ups, and I've done individual reviews for the second and third book, as well as the prequel novel that came out last year. Or was it this year? I can't remember. This is a complete demonology, so all of the demons that are known in this world are all in this book, which is amazing, and I really liked the illustrations. I've been waiting for something that was like this to happen because it's so cool. The Summoner series is described as being the Lord of the Rings meets Pokemon, because they have all of these different demons that they keep with them, and then they put them away and then bring them out to battle and to like hang out and stuff. But it also is set in a world that has dwarves and elves and orcs and all of that Lord of the Rings classic stuff. There's a lot of tensions between the different races because the elves don't like the humans and the humans subjugate the dwarves and no one likes orcs. So there's a lot of familiar things that are happening in this story. I actually think that this series is quite similar to Eragon. Like, I think that the main characters in Eragon and in the Summoner series are similar to each other. At least Fletcher is the main character of the main series. This book also has a novella or a short story that follows a character named James Baker. If you don't know the crossover between this and the original series, James Baker is the one who originally wrote this compendium that the main character gets a hold of at the beginning of the first book and kind of kickstarts everything. It's kind of James Baker's fault that Fletcher even gets involved in this war with the orcs and everything like that. You follow James as he finds out that he's a common summoner and goes to the Vulcan's Academy and then leaves and does some military service. So the story that you get in these is a very familiar story because you've experienced that kind of same premise. This is the third time in this world. However, this one goes past the series, so I don't recommend reading the story until after you've finished the trilogy because you'll spoil yourself if you have not finished the original trilogy. So I definitely recommend waiting to actually read the story until after finishing the series. As well as some of the descriptions of the demons and everything like that sometimes spoil things that happen in the books. So this is definitely something that you want to wait for and get after you've finished the series. I ended up really enjoying this. I was hoping that it would be a little bit different. Like, I was hoping it would be more of a Newt Scamander type of deal where he's bopping around and researching all the different demons and all of that, but it wasn't really like that. It was more of the same that we've gotten in some of the other stories, but I think that Taran Matharu does a good job of creating characters that you can't help but root for, and so I was just rooting for James throughout the entire thing and hoping that he would succeed, and it was sad what happened. But this world is so rich, it's definitely one where Taran could go back and continue to add to this world whenever he wanted to. So I'm hoping eventually one day he will go back and add more stories to this world, but yes. After that, I read The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. I had to read this for my law and literature class as well. I actually did not enjoy this. I ended up giving this one 2 stars. It follows this guy who at the beginning of the book decides that he wants to go and woo this really rich girl, so he needs to borrow money from his friend so that he can appear to also be rich. His friend ends up giving him the money, but he doesn't have the money at hand, so he has to borrow the money from a Jewish man from their town. The guy who actually does the borrowing has treated this Jewish man like complete trash because he is Jewish. The guy who originally borrows the money doesn't have the funds to pay it back, and in their contract, the Jewish man put in that he could take a pound of the original borrower's flesh. So the main event of this entire play is this trial where he's trying to get his pound of flesh and the other guy's trying to prevent himself from losing a pound of his own flesh. I understand why people would like this play, but I couldn't get over the anti-Semitic things that were going on in it and how they were treating all these Jewish people, and it was never said or portrayed that it was unfair or unjust. Sort of, they do talk about how the Jewish man is treated as being unfair, but with everything that happens in the end, it's just icky to me, and I just didn't like it, couldn't support it, couldn't get behind it, and yeah, so I ended up giving it 2 stars, which for me is a very low rating. Don't really recommend it. Which sucks because I haven't read a William Shakespeare play in so long that I was really looking forward to getting back into them and seeing some of his lesser known works and reading those and seeing how I felt, but I did not like this one. I don't have my lights here at home, so it's getting slowly darker and darker and darker, so I apologize for the lighting. I'm gonna get more yellow as the light goes away. After that, I read Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. This is the second book in the Strange the Dreamer duology. I don't know if it actually has a name. This one obviously continues where Strange the Dreamer left off. I did a book review for Strange the Dreamer, so I'll leave that up in the card symbol if you want to check it out. I'm also going to be filming a review of Muse of Nightmares when my copy comes in, so I'll be able to talk about it more when I actually have the physical book to talk to you about. The things that I loved about the first book continued in this book. I really liked the writing style, even though it is a very slow book. I really enjoyed it. I thought it really lent to learning more about the characters and learning more about the world. The world in this second book expands so much, and there's actually some big overlap between this series and her Daughter of Smoke and Bone series. In this one, I was just loving all the characters a lot. I love Minya. She is my favorite character in the whole series. I loved Thion's story arc in this. I really liked where it started and where it finished, and that he didn't 180 and become like a perfect person or anything like that. He's still working on himself at the end of the book. So I just really enjoyed the way that Laini developed her characters in this especially. And I also just hope that this is turned into like a bigger series, that she does more with this world, because I think she set it up so that she could if she wanted to. So I hope that she takes advantage of this. I hope that she treats this duology as a prequel duology and continues straight off with the characters that are there in the ending of the second book, and I hope we get to learn about that whole thing that's happening at the end of the second book. Don't want to spoil anything. But I did have a couple of big cons with this. One is that there is like some weird spectrophilia going on, and I could not get over it. I mean, I know exactly where it's gonna go. If there's a crossover series with the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series, I know exactly how that's gonna be okay, but I don't know. I'm not loving sex scenes between someone that's alive and someone that is not alive. So that was weird, and I didn't like it. People complain about the first book how there is insta-love, but I wasn't really bothered by that as much in the first book, but it started to bother me in this one because I wasn't loving it. And there are just some other things that I wasn't loving, so I ended up giving this book 4 stars instead of 5 stars, which is what I gave the first book, but I still think it is a very strong novel. The light is so gone. After that, I read City of Bones by Martha Wells. This is a standalone fantasy apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic novel. I'm going to be doing a book review for this one as well, so I will leave that up in the card symbol when it goes out. It should be out before this video goes up. This one follows a guy named Cat, and in this post-apocalyptic situation, there are regular humans and then there are these Christmen, and the Christmen are genetically engineered humans that are adapted to survive in this wasteland. The setting of the book is in this vast desert, and there's different cities that are built around these like spire-like towers, and there's different tiers, and the top tiers are the richest people, and then the bottom tiers are the poorest people, and there is a lot of power dynamics going on with that whole situation. But the Christmen are well adapted to living in this world. They can survive getting poisoned, they can survive in the desert for longer, they don't need as much water, that kind of stuff. And so because of those things, the Christmen have lived on their own for a very long time. They don't go into the regular human population very often. And so because of that, regular humans hate Christmen, and there's also some just like power dynamics there as well, where humans will try to kill Christmen because their bones are more magical than regular humans are. There's also some fantasy magic going on as well. I am not doing a very good job describing this book, but the premise and the world are very, very cool. It centers around one city specifically called Karasat, and Kat and his friend Sagai, who is his partner in crime kind of thing, they are people who find these different archaeological objects and sell them. They're kind of treasure hunters. If architects became treasure hunters, that's what their jobs are in this book. At the beginning of the book, Kat is hired to help this group of warders who are like the policemen of this world. They're trying to fix an engine that is in one of these abandoned technological towers called remnants. It's a lot more complicated than that. They get in a whole bunch of trouble. It's a lot of adventuring and maneuvering and fighting. I freaking adored this. I thought it was so fun. It's just so fun. The world building was so interesting to learn about. I really loved that they were these people that really go into archaeological sites and are trying to find these different pieces and valuing them, and they can see when things are faked, and I loved getting into the heads of these two characters as they were trying to stay afloat in this situation. God, I'm so yellow right now. I have not had a yellow video on my channel in so long. But there are just a lot more elements than I can talk about in this short form, so look forward to that review. It should be up in the card symbol if I'm doing things properly. With everything that I talked about and we'll talk about in that review, I ended up giving this book 4 stars. If you guys don't know, Martha Wells is popular for her science fiction novella series that's been coming out about a character named Murderbot, who I absolutely love. I need to continue with that novella series, but I also have read her Books of Rexura series, and that one is also fantastic. So she's just doing great. After that, I reread Eragon by Christopher Paolini. I actually listened to the audiobook, which I do not recommend. If you guys don't know, Eragon follows a young boy who's living in this very secluded area. At the beginning of the book, he finds this blue rock and it causes him all sorts of trouble. The rock ends up being a dragon egg, and so he becomes a dragon rider, and he's just trying to stay afloat in this world while also protecting the people that he loves. Riders in this world have disappeared because of infighting between different groups of riders. There's one empire that is over this whole land of Alagasia. Well, it doesn't control the whole thing, but a big portion of it. And there is a corrupt king named King Galbatorix, who is a dragon rider. He's the last dragon rider, and now Eragon is a threat to him. That's basically it. Eragon pulls very heavily from stories that came before. It pulls very heavily from The Lord of the Rings. It pulls very heavily on a whole bunch of other epic fantasy books as well. Why I love Eragon so much is that I read this book when I was a very young kid, and I just adored it. It was so much fun. It is so much adventure. There's so much fighting. It's just cool being able to ride on a dragon. So it's not the most unpredictable thing ever. It's not the most award-worthy novel ever written, but I think what it does really well is introduce people into the fantasy genre. It was one of the first fantasy books that I had ever read, so it has a huge nostalgia factor for me. I left my rating at the original 5 stars that I rated it, but I'm letting you guys know that if I were just picking this up, it would definitely not get 5 stars. It would probably be around a 3-star book for me, but I love it so much that I can't not give it 5 stars. The reason why I don't recommend the audiobook is that Eragon's voice sometimes changes, like mid-scene. I don't know why he starts sounding like a completely different person. He also gives Saphira, which is the name of the dragon, and this other character named Solumbum, who's a werecat, the weirdest voices. Like, I did not picture them with those voices when I was reading the book. The narrator gives Saphira like a gremlin voice. She sounds like a gremlin, and it is the most off-putting thing. Saphira and Solumbum both have the exact same voice as well, so that's kind of weird as well. So yeah, I didn't really love the audiobook, but I do love this book. And yeah, I left it at 5 stars, but that's a completely personal rating. I mean, all my ratings are personal, but this one is a hugely biased towards nostalgia, childhood Connor. This edition also has illustrations in it, like there's Brahm, so that's pretty cool. That illustration that I just showed you was by Christopher Paolini, the author, but there are other illustrations that are not done by him in this edition, if you're curious. The 115th thing that I read in 2018 is Sightwitch by Susan Dennard. This is novella 2.5 in the Witchland series. I've heard people say that this one does have overlap with the second book, but it's been a very long time since I read this, so I didn't see the connection that was going on. I listened to this as an audiobook, and the audiobook is so good for this one. Guys, it is so good. All the different characters have different voice narrators, so I guess it's technically a full cast. This novella is written in diary format though, so some people don't really love that as much, but I thought it really did a good job and contributed well to the story. I forgot to say that the Summoner's Handbook is also written as like a diary with like day blank and then his day's activities. That's kind of how Sightwitch is as well. I think that it adds a lot to the story, especially the time difference between different entries. The main character that you follow is a girl that has been living with the Sightwitches. The Sightwitches are a different group of witch in the Witchlands that aren't born with their powers. They get gifted their powers by devoting their lives to this goddess. So most people in the Witchlands have their powers as like an innate ability. They're born with it, they can use it. Wind witches can control the wind and stuff like that, and truth witches can know when someone is lying to them. Thread witches can see the bonds that connect people together, but sight witches have the ability to see into the future somewhat. And so this girl has been living at this, I want to say nunnery, but it's not really a nunnery, and she's devoted her life to this goddess, and she just wants to get the sight like all of her friends have been doing. I think that this novella does a really good job of portraying the feelings of not being the right sort or not being enough of something. The main character has a lot of self-doubt, and it really affects her day-to-day life and her mental state. I thought that Susan did that particular internal struggle really well on the page. You also follow another sight witch who lived 1,000 years before the beginning of this novella, and she is trying to prepare for an event that happens during the main character's lifetime. I thought that all of the characters were just so compelling. I think that the audiobook just does it so well because you can really picture each individual person and each individual voice. The main character, I think, is a person of color. I haven't seen the cover in quite some time, but the narrator has like an African English accent, like English spoken with an African accent, and I thought that that was really well done, and I just freaking loved this so much more than I was expecting. This might be my favorite thing that has been written in the Witchlands world so far, which is interesting because some people do not like this very much at all. I think that the Witchlands series is popular, but I don't think that it's popular enough. Sightwitch was great. I gave it 4 stars. And the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video, because I am just straight yellow now, is I finished reading Still Alice by Lisa Genova. I also read this one as an audiobook, listened to the audiobook. I've been driving a lot, so I've had these really long stretches of time where I can listen to audiobooks and get through a lot of them. So I read this one. This one is about a woman named Alice. She is a Harvard professor. She has 3 beautiful children that are mostly all doing really well. Her career is just growing and growing and growing. She has some amazing research that she's been working on. She's helping her doctorate students get through all of their schooling and everything like that. And then at the beginning of the book, she starts to forget things and she starts to feel lost in places that she shouldn't be feeling lost in. She finds out at the beginning of the book that she has early onset Alzheimer's and that she is going to die from this disease. I thought that this one was really well done as well. I read a book by Lisa Genova 2 years ago. I read Inside the O'Briens, which is about a man who gets Huntington's disease, which is basically a death sentence. Huntington's disease is also autosomal dominant, which means that if one of your parents has Huntington's or early onset dementia, you have a 50-50 chance of also getting the disease. So in that respect of the children deciding whether or not they wanted to get tested to see if they're going to get this disease or not, I thought that the 2 books ended up being quite similar to each other. But other than that, I think that there are a lot of differences, especially with the symptoms of the disease and how the family reacts to everything. I was getting so frustrated with Alice's husband. Oh my gosh, he was the most frustrating man. I was like, you need to just get your crap together and support your wife and love your wife and do what needs to be done. He was so frustrating. Lisa Genova has a really accessible writing style that's really easy to get into. I, as I said, listened to this as an audiobook, and the audiobook for Still Alice is narrated by Lisa Genova. At the beginning of the audiobook, I was kind of getting frustrated and thinking that it was very just monotone and I wasn't getting a whole lot from the characters, but towards the middle of the novel, I was getting so connected with the main character. I ended up really caring for Alice and was just loving her. So I think that if at first you have a hard time connecting with Alice, I think that if you just give it a little bit of time, you'll definitely be able to make those connections and really feel for Alice and feel for her family as they're fighting this disease and going through this whole process. One thing that I really like about Lisa Genova's books is that at the end there's always like a postscript that explains stuff that happens in the novel. So Inside the O'Briens, she was talking about the different families that she had talked to in order to portray those feelings that the families are portraying in the book accurately. This one, I think, is based more off of the experience of her grandmother, but overall, I really, really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars as well. I just really enjoyed reading about Alice's story and reading about her family. Even though it's fictionalized, you can definitely see real families reacting to this situation exactly how her family did and exactly how her children do and how her husband did in the novel. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed that one. I am going to be reading, I think it's called Love, Anthony next, which I have on my shelf at school, so I'll be able to read that one soon and let you guys know my thoughts as well. But Still Alice was very good. I have not watched the movie yet, so if you have watched the movie and you do recommend it, let me know down in the comments. So those are the next grouping of books that I have read in 2018. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and comment down below what you've been reading recently. Have you read any of the books that I talked about in this video? Let me know anything down below, and I will talk to you guys next time.